I remember the day my mom texted me. "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now. Ha ha." No call, no warning, just that one message lighting up the dark. I stood there for a second staring at it, then I laughed, quiet, almost calm. Because that wasn't the end of anything. That was the start. 2 days later, their lawyer reached out with 5 words that told me everything had flipped. "We have a problem. Call immediately." Before I get into what happened, hit like and tell me in the comments, have you ever been blindsided by your own family? Your stories remind me I'm not the only one. People used to say we were the perfect family on Maple Street, white shutters, trimmed hedges, Sunday dinners that smelled like roast chicken, and false peace. If you drove by, you'd probably think warmth lived behind those windows. But perfection is quiet only because it's rehearsed. I was raised to play my part, the reliable daughter, the fixer, the one who didn't talk back. Dad Richard Liu was the type of man who believed love meant obedience. If something broke, he'd call my name before reaching for a tool. "Kara, hold the ladder." "Kara, grab the wrench." I learned to balance on rooftops before I learned to rest. My hands were covered in tiny cuts from wood and wire, but he'd laugh and say, "You're tougher than any son I could have had." Mom would smile, that perfect smile, the one that hid every sharp edge beneath politeness, and add, "Family doesn't count debts." They said it so often it became a prayer. Family doesn't count debts. Translation, everything you give us is owed. Everything we take is love. Then there was Emily, my little sister. 2 years younger, softer, prettier. She never had to lift more than a makeup brush. Dad called her the delicate one, and Mom called her our pride. I was proud too once. I believed that keeping the peace was my job, that fixing their messes was proof of devotion. When money got tight, Mom would sigh dramatically over the electric bill, and somehow my wallet would open. At 17, I was helping with mortgage payments. By 21, I was covering repairs. It didn't feel wrong back then, it felt like love. They told me I was so good with numbers, so dependable, and I mistook manipulation for gratitude. Every time I patched a wall or transferred a payment, I told myself I was holding the family together. But there's a price to being the glue you never get to stop holding. I remember one Thanksgiving standing by the window watching Mom hand Emily a small jewelry box. Inside was a gold bracelet engraved with her initials. "It's for our little artist," Mom said. Emily hugged her. I smiled, pretending I didn't feel the chill crawl up my arms. That bracelet probably cost the same as 3 months of my rent at the time. But family doesn't count debts right now. Years later, that phrase still echoes in my head, soft, poisonous. I can still smell the varnish from the banister I painted at 16, hear the creak of the lock I once fixed for Dad, see the porch light I replaced flickering in memory. The same porch light that would one day shine over a door I wasn't allowed to open. It started with whispers, soft enough to sound harmless. I came home late from work one night, shoes damp from the Portland rain, and heard my name through the kitchen door. I should have kept walking, but something in Mom's voice froze me mid-step. She doesn't realize all her help was voluntary, she said, quiet but clear. "When we sell the house, it'll just be our names on the papers." My chest tightened. Sell the house, our house, the same place I'd painted, repaired, financed piece by piece for years. Dad's laugh came next, low and smug. Classic Kara, all heart, no business sense. Then Emily's voice hesitant. "But won't she expect something?" Mom snorted. "Expect what? She gave gifts. Gifts don't buy ownership." For a second I thought I'd misheard. The room spun in silence, the air thick with the smell of leftover dinner and betrayal. I gripped the wall until my knuckles went white. "Gifts," I whispered to myself, the word curdling in my mouth. They were dividing my effort like spoils, and I was the fool who funded their comfort. I walked to my room without a sound, every step heavy, rehearsing the script they'd written for me my entire life. Be grateful, be quiet, be useful. But something inside me cracked that night. I didn't cry. I didn't confront them. I sat on the edge of my bed, the glow of my laptop reflecting in my eyes, and I started remembering every transfer, every bill, every time they'd said, "Just this once." Hours passed. The house went still. I could hear the rain against the window and the faint hum of the refrigerator steady, unbothered, unlike my heartbeat. Then, just as I was about to close my laptop, my phone buzzed. 11:27 p.m. Mom, we changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now, haha. The words burned into me one by one. I read them again, slower. Locks, home, brave. And that laugh, haha, mocking, sharp final. No call, no explanation, just that cold message glowing in the dark. I don't know how long I stared at it. Maybe a minute, maybe 10. Then something strange happened. I laughed too. Soft at first, then louder until it echoed off the empty walls, because in that moment I saw the truth clearly for the first time. They hadn't shut me out. They'd freed me. I turned off the phone, opened my laptop again, and started typing not a message, not a plea, but a list. Dates, payments, repairs, every cent, every receipt, every promise. When I was little, Dad used to say, if you want something done right, do it yourself. Fine. I would. By dawn, I had a folder named Proof. And as the sun crept over the blinds, warming the cold air of my room, I made a quiet promise to myself this time I wasn't fixing anything for them. I was dismantling everything they'd built on me. The morning after that message, something inside me reset. No anger, no tears, just a clean, eerie calm. I brewed coffee, logged into work like nothing had happened, and started moving in silence. If my family wanted to see how brave I was, they were about to find out on paper. By day, I was still the dependable data analyst at a downtown firm. My coworkers had no idea that every spare minute was spent tracing back a different kind of data, my own history. I pulled old emails, bank transfers, utility statements, payments for roofing materials, contractor quotes I'd covered temporarily, grocery receipts from the months they'd claimed they were broke. Every number had a story, and every story pointed in the same direction they had taken, and I had paid. I started building what I called the ledger of truth. One column for what I'd given, one for what they'd promised. The totals didn't just add up, they screamed. $47,000 toward the mortgage, $23,000 for renovations, $15,000 for emergencies, $85,000 of my life. Dad always bragged that I was the only one in the family who understood money. He just never realized how dangerous that would make me once I stopped using it for them. When my screen filled with lines of proof, I printed everything labeled each stack and tucked them into a file box under my desk. I didn't plan to run to court right away. Revenge. I decided should age like wine, not explode like fire. I met with 3 different attorneys over the next few weeks. The first 2 spoke to me like I was just another hurt daughter looking for sympathy. The third one didn't. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You've got a case," she said. "A solid one. It's not about the deed. It's about equity. If you can prove contribution and intent, you have standing." Intent. That word clicked. I thought about the text again. "Let's see how brave you are now, haha." That wasn't just cruelty, it was proof. Malicious intent in writing. From that moment, every step I took was deliberate. I documented new transfers. I archived every voicemail Mom left pretending to check in. I backed up every file, twice one on my laptop, one in the cloud. At night, I'd sit at my desk watching the cursor blink beside the word evidence. My apartment was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the occasional ping of another bank alert confirming what I already knew: I had the upper hand. By the time spring rolled around, my case was airtight. My attorney was ready, the paperwork drafted. We just needed one final trigger, something that showed intent beyond question. It arrived right on schedule. 2 days after the anniversary of that lock-changing text, I got an email. The subject line read, "Urgent property sale notice." They were selling the house. Without telling me, I smiled. Finally, they'd handed me exactly what I needed. The day of the mediation felt nothing like the storms I'd imagined. No thunder, no chaos, just a crisp Portland morning that smelled faintly of rain and paper. I walked into the downtown law office with a folder tucked under my arm and a coffee in my hand. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. I'd already lived through the worst part, being locked out of my own home by the people who swore they loved me. The receptionist guided me to a sterile conference room. White walls, long table, 2 pitchers of water untouched. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. I sat down, placed the folder in front of me, and waited. A few minutes later, the door opened. My parents entered first, Mom in her usual soft beige coat, the one she wore to church to look humble, and Dad in his pressed shirt, jaw-tight eyes burning. Emily trailed behind them, twisting the strap of her purse, her face pale. Kara, Mom said softly, that same tone she used whenever she needed something. "You look tired, sweetheart." "Good morning," I replied, my voice calm, almost detached. Her lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You didn't have to make this so official. We could have talked." I tilted my head. "You changed the locks. Talking didn't seem to be our family's preferred method." Her smile faltered, but before she could answer, the mediator, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, entered, followed by both attorneys. Mine gave me a reassuring nod as we took our seats. The first few minutes were procedural, polite, the kind of civility that makes your skin crawl when you know what's really underneath. Then my attorney opened the folder and began laying out the documents, page after page, of receipts, transfers, invoices. "This file," she said, sliding it toward the center of the table, "contains proof of Ms. Liu's direct financial contributions to the property located at 2146 Maple Street over a 14-year period." Dad leaned forward, scoffing. "That's ridiculous. Those were gifts. She was helping her family." My attorney didn't flinch. The payments were repeatedly labeled as temporary assistance, with the expectation of reimbursement. You'll also find text messages where both you and Mrs. Liu referred to those payments as loans. We have evidence of concealment of assets as well, bank statements showing you maintained substantial savings while requesting money from Ms. Liu under the pretense of financial hardship. Mom shifted uncomfortably. Her hands, perfectly manicured, trembled as she reached for the papers. "This is being twisted. I interrupted for the first time. "You told me I didn't have a home anymore. Remember that." The room went silent. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at me, pleading. "That was a misunderstanding, Kara. We were angry. It's in writing," my attorney added, sliding another page across the table. Dated and time-stamped, 11:27 p.m. The text reads, "We changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Let's see how brave you are now, haha." The mediator adjusted his glasses, frowning. That message certainly suggests intent. Dad's face turned crimson. "She's twisting everything." "That text was a joke." I met his glare evenly. "So was your idea of family." The mediator tried to regain control, but the tension had already snapped. My attorney continued methodically, pointing out every inconsistency, every false statement. The evidence stacked higher. Thicker mortgage payments I'd covered, renovation costs, utility bills, even the receipts for the new locks. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The opposing attorney, an older man with weary eyes, cleared his throat and leaned toward my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Liu," he whispered urgently, though the room was quiet enough for everyone to hear, "we have a problem. You need to call me immediately after this session." The irony hit me like sunlight after a storm. I smiled, just barely. There it was, the line from my thumbnail of a life finally playing out in real time. Mom's composure cracked. "Kara, please," she said, her voice wobbling. "We're family. Don't do this." I looked at her for a long moment, then spoke softly. "You're right. We are family. That's why I gave you chances, years of them. But family isn't a free pass to take and take until someone breaks." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Yes, you did," I said. "You just didn't want to believe it." Dad slammed his palm on the table. "After everything we gave you," I cut him off, my voice steady. "After everything I gave you, you didn't raise me, you drained me." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The sound of the air conditioner filled the space between us, humming like white noise over the wreckage of our relationship. My attorney finally broke the silence. "Given the evidence presented, we're requesting a 50% ownership interest in the property or equivalent compensation based on current market value." The mediator nodded slowly. "It's a reasonable demand considering the documentation." Dad looked like he might explode. Mom reached for his arm, but he jerked away. Emily sat rigid, staring at the table. When the session ended, my parents rushed out first, whispering to each other in panic. Their lawyer followed, phone already in hand, his voice sharp. "Yes, I'm aware. I told them we have a problem." I stayed seated for a moment longer, staring at the folder in front of me, the quiet weapon I'd built out of betrayal. As I stood, my attorney smiled faintly. "You handled that well," she said. "Numbers don't lie," I replied. "People do." Outside the city was drenched in gold light. The street smelled of wet pavement and victory. I walked past a coffee shop window, caught my reflection, and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back, steady, untouchable, free. I wasn't the daughter who obeyed anymore. I was the woman who learned how to fight without raising her voice. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt precise, powerful. They thought changing the locks would end my story. It only opened the door to theirs. The court's decision came 6 weeks later, printed neatly in black and white, 50% ownership awarded to me. It wasn't luck, it was proof. Every line, every number, every late-night calculation finally meant something. The house sold for more than they'd expected. After legal fees and taxes, my parents walked away with half of what they thought they'd retire on. They'd built their future on my obedience and watched it crumble under my evidence. I didn't move back in. That house was nothing but ghosts wearing the shape of family. Instead, I bought a small townhouse across town. The first thing I did was change the locks myself. New keys, new rules, new peace. Sometimes my phone lights up with their names, Dad's emails full of guilt, Mom's voicemails dripping with regret, but I never answer. Some doors once closed stay that way. On quiet mornings, I sit by my window with coffee and sunlight warming my face, listening to the hum of my own space. No footsteps, no orders, no demands. Just quiet, just mine. They changed the locks to keep me out. I changed mine to keep them from ever walking in again. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about loyalty. What they really taught me was how to live without them. Freedom didn't come with forgiveness, it came with boundaries and a brand new set of keys. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just signs papers and walks away quietly. And that's enough. If you've ever had to rebuild from the wreckage your own family left behind, you're not alone. Your peace is worth protecting, even if you have to fight for it. Hit like, share your story in the comments, and subscribe for more true stories of quiet revenge and hard-won freedom.
My name is Pamela McDowell, and I was 29 years old the day my world shattered in silence. The church smelled of lilies and candle wax. Stained glass spilled jeweled light across the aisle. Crimson and sapphire streaming over the polished floor. The organ hummed softly like a heartbeat beneath everything. I stood there at the altar in a dress that shimmered like breath, my fingers laced through Ryan's. My pulse was a steady drum, but it wasn't fear, it was certainty. This was the moment little girls dream about, and women rehearse in secret. My father sat in the front pew, his chin trembling with pride. My mother wept quietly, clutching the handkerchief she'd carried at her own wedding. I had imagined this scene for years, the way Ryan's voice would sound when he promised forever. The priest smiled between us, voice warm and deliberate. His words blurred into music, to love and to cherish in sickness and in health. And then he turned to Ryan. "Do you take this woman?" That's when it happened. Ryan's fingers twitched in mine. His grip turned clammy, hesitant. His throat bobbed as he leaned closer, so close that the guests probably thought he was whispering something tender. I even smiled, expecting the words, "I love you." But his breath trembled against my ear. "I can't do this," he whispered. At first I thought I'd misheard him. My smile froze polite, confused. Then he said it again, clearer, heavier. "I can't marry you, Pamela. I'm sorry, but Hannah's here." The name dropped into my chest like a stone through glass. Hannah, his ex. The passionate mistake. The one he swore was ancient history. He went on, his voice shaking with some feverish conviction. "She's just more. More passion, more life, more everything. I can't explain it. The rest dissolved into the air between us. The colors in the church bled out of the world. The reds and blues from the glass windows turned white and harsh. I heard the faintest crack, maybe from my heart, maybe from reality. I looked at him. Really looked. His pupils were wide with panic, his jaw trembling. I had loved this face. I had traced its angles 100 times, memorized every line. Now it looked foreign, like I was staring at an impersonator wearing Ryan's skin. For a long second, everything was suspended. The priest's lips parted, but no sound came out. The guests fidgeted in their seats, sensing the rupture before understanding it. My first instinct wasn't to cry. It wasn't even to shout. It was a deep, freezing stillness, like my soul had been packed in ice to stop it from bleeding. I heard my own voice before I even decided to speak. Calm, controlled. "Father," I said quietly, interrupting his confused stammer. "May I—" He blinked startled, then handed me the microphone. Ryan's eyes darted to mine, desperate pleading. "Pamela, please don't—" But I'd already stepped forward. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor as I turned to face the sea of guests, friends, family, co-workers. Every pair of eyes was a reflection of disbelief. "I'm sorry to inform you all," I said, my voice steady enough to echo. "The wedding is canceled." A gasp rippled through the room. I continued, unflinching. "It seems the groom has had a change of heart, but please enjoy the reception. The food and wine are already paid for." There was a brief silence, then a murmur. Someone sobbed. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." I handed the microphone back to the priest. My fingers were trembling now, but I kept my chin high. Ryan called my name as I turned away, but I didn't look back. The sound of the church doors creaking open cut through the noise like a blade. Sunlight spilled across the aisle. I walked straight through it, through the dust-filled air, through the stairs, through the wreckage of a life I'd built in my mind. Outside, the sky was blindingly blue, ordinary, cruel. The doors closed behind me, muffling the chaos I'd left inside, the gasps, the whispers, his mother crying. I could still hear his voice echoing in my head. "She's just more." I stood on the church steps, the lace of my veil trembling in the wind. A photographer across the street lifted his camera instinctively. Maybe thinking this was still part of the wedding, I turned my face away. For a long moment, I just breathed. In, out, in, out. No tears, not yet. Then I walked down those steps one at a time, careful, deliberate, as if each step was a line dividing who I used to be from who I would have to become. Behind me, the bells began to ring for someone else's wedding, echoing faintly over the city. And all I could think was, he wanted more. I didn't cry that day. I didn't scream, didn't run, didn't demand an explanation. I simply walked away, and somehow that calm was more terrifying than any outburst could have been. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was already vibrating nonstop. My mother, his mother, bridesmaids, journalists even. The wedding had become a living headline. Runaway groom leaves bride at the altar. I turned the phone off and booked a taxi to the airport. My suitcase was still packed, silk dresses, heels, sunscreen, everything meant for our honeymoon. 2 tickets to paradise now, just 1. The airport was fluorescent, loud, and mercifully indifferent. People rushing, children crying, luggage wheels rattling over the tiles. It was life messy and moving on, and I envied it. When the attendant looked at my ticket, her smile was automatic. "Congratulations, Mrs. Davis' honeymoon to Bali. How exciting is your husband joining you later?" Her words hit like static against glass. "No," I said softly. "It's just me." The smile faltered her pity, quick but awkward. I'm so sorry." "Don't be," I replied. "It's a long story." I didn't sleep on the 14-hour flight. I stared out the window as clouds drifted past like silent witnesses. My reflection in the glass looked composed, hair neat, posture perfect, but my eyes, they were empty. When I landed in Bali, the air was thick with salt and frangipani. Paradise smelled like irony. The resort staff greeted me with garlands, bowing and smiling. "Welcome, Mrs. Davis," one said brightly. "Congratulations on your marriage." My throat tightened. I nodded wordlessly. The suite was breathtaking. White linens, rose petals on the bed. A bottle of champagne chilling beside a card that read, "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Davis." I swept the petals to the floor with one hand. The sound of them falling was absurdly loud in the silence. I opened the champagne not to celebrate, but because it was there. The cork hit the ceiling, bounced off, rolled under the table. I drank straight from the bottle until the bubbles burned my throat. That first night, I lay across the giant bed meant for two, staring at the ceiling fan turning lazy circles above me. The hum filled the room like white noise. I whispered his words into the dark. She's just more. More what? More reckless, more alive, more fun. I thought of every moment Ryan and I had built together, the quiet breakfasts, the rain-soaked grocery runs, the plans scribbled on napkins. Was that less? Was I less? The next morning, I walked the beach alone. The water was impossibly blue, the kind of color people post online with captions about healing. My feet sank into the sand, the waves kissed my ankles, and still I felt nothing. I visited every place we'd planned to go together. The temple overlooking the cliffs, the night market, glowing with lanterns, the waterfall hidden in the jungle. I went through the motions like an actor performing for an audience that no longer existed. Everywhere I turned, people were in pairs, laughing, kissing, arguing, existing. I watched them like a ghost watching the living. My phone stayed silent. I didn't open it for days. When I finally connected to Wi-Fi, it lit up with notifications, dozens of messages. From my parents, from his parents, from friends, from Ryan himself. Ryan. Please, Pamela. I didn't mean for it to happen that way. I panicked. I'm sorry, Ryan. You don't understand. She showed up. I thought I was over her. I just lost control. Ryan. Please call me. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I blocked his number. It felt both cowardly and powerful, like slamming a door that should have been closed long ago. I stayed in Bali 2 weeks. I swam in turquoise water until my fingers wrinkled. I ate candlelit dinners alone. I watched sunsets so beautiful they should have healed me, but they didn't. The pain was there just frozen beneath the surface, and I wasn't ready to thaw it yet. I wasn't ready to feel anything. When I boarded the plane home, I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just whispered to myself as the engines roared and the island shrank beneath me. He wanted more. Let him drown in it. The silence of my apartment hit harder than the church bells ever did. I opened the door, expecting what exactly? An apology letter, a box of regret tied in ribbon. Instead, I found chaos. Drawers half open. Clothes thrown in piles. Our framed photo from a hiking trip face down on the floor, its glass cracked straight through the middle, right between our smiles. That single fracture said everything. He'd come back after the disaster, packed in a rush, and left again. I pictured him tossing his shirts into a bag while her car waited outside. The thought should have broken me. Instead, it left me strangely cold. There's something liberating about devastation. It burns everything that can't survive the fire. I started cleaning, methodically. Like surgery, I boxed up his books, his shaving kit, his stupid mug that said, "World's Best Fiancé." Each item went into a cardboard coffin. No tears, no hesitation. By midnight, the apartment was spotless, sterile, too quiet. I poured a glass of water and sat on the floor beside the cracked photo frame. The reflection in the broken glass looked like two versions of me, one still standing at the altar and one who had already walked away. That night I dreamed of the church again, only this time it was empty. The organ played itself and there was no groom, just my own footsteps echoing off the walls. When I woke up, the dream felt like a warning. This isn't where your story ends. The next morning I called the building manager and gave notice. I couldn't live in a mausoleum. I moved into a small, clean corporate apartment that smelled faintly of paint and possibility. Fresh start, new walls, no ghosts. A few days later my phone rang. Unknown number. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. "Hello, you can't just ghost me," the voice hissed. It was Ryan. For a heartbeat, I almost didn't recognize him, the trembling edge in his tone, like guilt mixed with fear. "I needed time," I said flatly. "Time," he snapped. "You humiliated me, Pamela, in front of everyone." My laugh was soft, sharp, cruel. "You humiliated yourself. I just refused to join in." He went silent for a moment, breathing raggedly. Then his voice broke. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I saw Hannah and God. It was like everything I thought I wanted came rushing back." I closed my eyes. "You made your choice clear, Ryan. It wasn't a choice," he cried. It was a feeling. "You and I were calm, safe. But she makes me feel alive." Alive. That word again. Like stability was death and chaos was oxygen. I felt something shift in me then, a hardening. "You don't want to feel alive, Ryan. You want to feel addicted," I said quietly. "And that's not love. It's a habit." He stammered, desperate. "Please, Pamela, don't do this. I already did." I hung up, blocked the number. Then I set the phone down and realized my hand wasn't shaking, not even a little. That was the first sign I was coming back to life on my own terms. Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt in silence. I went to work early, stayed late. My coworkers whispered behind my back, at first pity disguised as curiosity. I ignored them. I joined a gym. The first time I hit the treadmill, I could almost feel the anger leave through the soles of my shoes. Anger burns calories. Pain builds muscle. There's poetry in that. I found small comforts, morning coffee on my balcony podcasts about resilience, the smell of clean laundry. Every ritual was a quiet rebellion against the woman who stood frozen at the altar. One evening, as I unpacked the last of my boxes, the landline rang again. This time, it wasn't him, it was his mother. "Pamela," she said, voice sharp but trembling, "you've made your point. He's sorry. He's been miserable." I almost smiled. So have I. Difference is, I didn't cause mine. "You can't just throw love away like this." "Love," I said softly. "If this is love, I'll take peace instead." She sputtered, but I was already done. "I wish you both healing, Mrs. Davis," I said, then hung up. That night I slept for the first time in weeks. No dreams, no noise, just quiet. And in that quiet, I realized something beautiful. My world hadn't ended at that altar. It had started there. It had been 5 months since the altar. 5 months of muted mornings, gym playlists, long hours at work, and a peace so still it almost frightened me. My therapist once said, healing doesn't happen in a straight line, it's a spiral. You circle the pain, come close, pull away, then return from a higher place. She was right. Some mornings I woke up fine. Others I woke up remembering the weight of his hand in mine. But I was no longer haunted, just aware. Then one evening, as the city hummed outside my window, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in forever, Sarah Bennett. Sarah was a mutual friend, one of those people who lived for gossip, but wrapped it in concern. I almost ignored the call, but curiosity won. "Pamela." She gasped the second I picked up. "Oh my God, you actually answered." "Hey, Sarah," I said evenly. "It's been a while. I know. Listen, I probably shouldn't be calling, but you deserve to know before it becomes, well, news." That got my attention. "Know what?" She hesitated, drawing out the moment like a suspense scene. "It's Ryan and Hannah." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. She filled the silence the way people always do when they crave reaction. "So after, the wedding that wasn't, they went ahead and had this tacky courthouse wedding. No family, no guests, just 2 random witnesses from the street. It was pathetic. My voice was calm. I see." Sarah continued, energized by my restraint. "Anyway, it fell apart fast. He lost his job a month later. Apparently he's got an issue with authorities, surprise, surprise, and then he just stopped trying. He's been living off her credit cards, like literally sponging off her." I leaned against the window frame, city lights painting my reflection in gold. "I figured something like that might happen," I murmured. "Oh, that's not even the worst part," she said, her tone dropping conspiratorially. "He's turned into a complete nightmare, controlling, moody, shouting at her in public. My friend Maya saw them at a bar. He was yelling at Hannah because she looked at a waiter too long." A pause, and she just took it, like she was afraid of him. My heart didn't twist. It didn't even flinch. It just felt still. I should have felt vindicated, but instead I felt old, tired, done. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "For her." Sarah's voice sharpened. "You're sorry for her, Pamela? She stole your fiancé. She didn't steal him," I said quietly. "He wasn't mine if he could be taken." That shut her up for a second. Then she dropped the final blow, the one she'd been saving. And get this, he was cheating on her. The whole time, with some girl he met at the gym. There was satisfaction in her tone, as if this was justice and I should be celebrating. I didn't. So, I said after a long silence, he finally found his more. More chaos, more lies, more damage. Sarah gave a small, awkward laugh. "Guess karma came fast, huh?" "Karma's not mine to serve," I said. "I stopped waiting for it a long time ago." Another pause. Then softly, "You really don't care, do you?" I smiled faintly, watching headlights move across the wall. "Caring is what got me here. I'm done with that." She sighed. "You've changed." "Good." After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood on my balcony. The city buzzed below strangers, laughing. Cars weaving lives colliding in motion. I thought about Hannah crying. in some apartment she couldn't afford. Ryan breaking another promise, both of them trapped in the same fire they'd started. And for the first time, I understood what real peace felt like. It wasn't happiness. It was absence, the absence of noise, of chaos, of caring about what burned behind me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't even want closure. I just wanted quiet. And that's exactly what I had. The next morning, I deleted Sarah's number, because the past doesn't deserve an audience. Peace is fragile. It can shatter with one vibration from your phone. It started on a Wednesday night. I'd just finished cooking something simple, roasted vegetables and tea, and was halfway through a book when the screen lit up. Unknown number. 10:14 p.m. I made the biggest mistake of my life. He was a monster. You were my peace. Please, can we just talk? I stared at the message until the words blurred into static. There was no name, but there didn't need to be one. I knew that syntax by heart. I didn't reply. I didn't even feel anger. It was like hearing the echo of a song I'd already forgotten the tune to. Delete. Block. 2 days later, another number. 2:31 p.m. Remember our trip to the mountains? That was real. What we had was real. Liam, no. Not Liam. Ryan. I still slip sometimes when I remember the old version of the story. Ryan was a fantasy, a stupid fantasy. I see that now. It was clever, almost surgical, targeting the memory that used to undo me. That weekend in the cabin had been our best snow, outside firelight on his face, laughter muffled under blankets. Now the memory was hollow, like film with no sound. Delete, block. A week passed. Silence returned. Then the tone shifted. Unknown number, 11:07 p.m. So you're just going to ignore me after everything? I guess you never really loved me either. You're just as cold as he said you were. I exhaled slow and steady. There it was, the pivot from apology to accusation. When begging doesn't work, blame becomes the language of regret. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry for what it cost her. I didn't block this one right away. I just stared at the message, the screen's light reflecting on my glass of water. Then a tiny, uninvited smile curved my lips. Delete. That night I slept well. But ghosts don't rest easily. 3 days later, my phone rang again. This time her mother. Pamela came, the voice sharp with righteousness, trembling with nerves. You can't just abandon her now. After what that man did to her, she's broken. You have to forgive her. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Patricia, I said softly, I understand you're hurting for your daughter, but she ended our friendship, not me. She's learned her lesson, Patricia snapped. A real woman doesn't turn her back on another when she's down. That stung, but not the way she intended. It reminded me of every time I'd been told to be softer, quieter, forgiving to the point of self-destruction. I took a slow breath and let my tone turn calm and firm like glass that doesn't bend. I'm sorry you're seeing her in pain, I said, but she built that pain with her choices. It's not my job to fix what she broke. You can't mean that, Patricia whispered. I do, and this will be the last time we speak. Click. I blocked the number before she could call back. For a while, I stood there, phone in hand, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. The woman looking back at me wasn't the trembling bride from the altar. She was still measured steady. I realized something profound. Then peace isn't found in forgiveness or revenge. It's found in indifference. When their words no longer sting, when their names no longer echo, when your silence becomes heavier than their noise, that's freedom. That night, I turned off my phone, lit a candle, and wrote in my journal. They wanted my forgiveness. But what they really wanted was my attention, and I owe them neither. Then I blew out the candle, and for the first time in a year, my sleep was dreamless. A year passed before I even realized it had. Time didn't heal everything. It just made the wounds less noisy. The ghost calls stopped. The whispers faded. And one morning I woke up and noticed something I hadn't felt in a long time: light. It was streaming through my apartment window, catching on the rim of my coffee mug, warm and simple. I had survived the noise, and in the quiet that followed, I began to rebuild. Work became my sanctuary first. I wasn't hiding behind my career. I was rediscovering my worth in it. Each project, each presentation, each solved problem reminded me that competence is its own form of beauty. My coworkers started asking for my opinion more. My boss mentioned promotion in passing. It didn't thrill me, but it anchored me. Then came the gym. At first, I went to exhaust my body so my mind would stop spinning. But soon I began to enjoy it, the rhythm of movement, the music in my ears, the silence afterward. Every drop of sweat felt like anger leaving my skin. Every rep rebuilt a small piece of me, that had been shattered at that altar. I stopped checking social media altogether. No photos of him, no rumors, no reminders. When people mentioned his name in passing, I no longer flinched. It became just another sound in the air. And somewhere between late nights at work and early morning jogs, I met Michael Bennett. He was an architect we hired for a new design project, a man whose calm felt earned, not practiced. He laughed easily, but there was substance behind his eyes. He noticed small things when I changed my perfume, when I looked tired but pretended not to be. The first time he asked me out for coffee, I almost said no. Habit, maybe. Fear. But something in his tone, gentle, patient, made it easy to say yes. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into Sunday walks. And for once there were no fireworks, no dizzying highs or shattering lows, just warmth. Steady, honest warmth. One night as we walked along the riverside, he asked softly, "Were you ever married?" The question caught me off guard. The truth was tangled in silence for a moment. "No," I said finally, my voice steady. "Almost." He nodded, not pushing for details. "Almost can be harder than yes or no." "That's true," I murmured. Then he smiled gently. "But almost means there's still room for something better." That stayed with me. For the first time, I felt seen not for my history, but for who I was despite it. Weeks turned into months. The winter air softened. My therapist noticed the shift before I did. "You're not talking about him anymore," she said with a small smile. "I guess I ran out of things to say," I replied. My apartment looked different now, bright, uncluttered, full of small tokens of a life I chose. Plants that didn't die, artwork. I'd bought for myself a record player that filled the evenings with soft jazz instead of silence. One night, while washing dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. For a split second, I didn't recognize myself. There was no exhaustion in my face, no ache behind my eyes, just calm. That's when I realized healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without pain. The next morning, Michael left a small envelope on my desk. Inside was a hand-drawn sketch of a house. Nothing grand, just a quiet place near the woods with big windows and a wraparound porch. Underneath it, he'd written, "When we're ready to build." I smiled, tracing the lines of the drawing with my thumb. It didn't feel like a proposal. It felt like a promise, steady, patient, real. That evening, as I watched the sunset spill through the blinds, I whispered to myself, "I no longer dream of closure, I live it." It happened on a Friday night. The kind of night that glows soft jazz, champagne flutes, clinking laughter, bouncing off white walls and polished floors. Michael had invited me to an art exhibition his firm had helped design. It was a minimalist space, all curved glass and light wood. The kind of place where the air felt curated. He stood beside me, one hand at the small of my back, explaining how the lighting was meant to make the paintings breathe. I wasn't really listening. I was just happy. Quietly, fully, unpretentiously happy. It's strange how happiness sneaks up on you. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It just sits beside you one day and asks, "Can I stay?" We wandered between canvases, moody blues, shimmering golds, something abstract that looked like a storm breaking open. I stopped before one of them and tilted my head. "It feels like drowning and healing at the same time," I murmured. Michael smiled. "That's how I felt when I met you." Before I could reply, I felt it, that prickling at the back of my neck, the sense of being watched. I turned, and there he was, Ryan. He looked smaller somehow, as if the months had scraped pieces off him. The confident smirk he used to wear had collapsed into something brittle. His suit was wrinkled, his tie too tight. His eyes, once sharp with arrogance, were tired and hollow. For a moment the world narrowed just like it had in the church, only this time I wasn't the one trembling. He walked toward me, slowly rehearsed smile, faltering with every step. "Pamela," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. "Wow. You look alive," I finished for him. He blinked, unsure whether I was mocking or honest. I didn't clarify. Michael turned slightly, his presence steady, protective, but never possessive. I could feel his warmth even without looking at him. Ryan exhaled shakily. "You look incredible. Really. I've thought about reaching out." "You did," I said evenly. "Several times." He flinched. "Yeah, I just didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound stupid. Maybe because there isn't anything that would sound right," I said. He swallowed hard, glancing down, then back up. "I made a mess of everything. Hannah, she's gone. Took off 2 months ago. Said she needed to find herself. Turns out what she found was someone else's husband. I said nothing. The silence between us felt surgical precise, cutting clean. I think about that day, he continued, at the altar. What I said to you, I was God. I was so wrong. I thought passion meant chaos and stability meant boredom. Turns out chaos just burns until there's nothing left. He gave a small, broken laugh. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away. Once those words would have gutted me, but now they barely grazed the surface. I studied him the way one studies an old photograph, familiar but no longer real. That feels like a lifetime ago, I said quietly. He searched my face, hoping for softness, forgiveness, anything to grab onto. Pamela is there. Any chance? Before I could answer, Michael returned from the bar with 2 glasses of champagne. His hand brushed my arm as he passed me one. Hey, sweetheart, he said casually. Then turned with his usual easy warmth. Oh, hi there. I'm Michael. Ryan's expression faltered. I'm, Ryan. Nice to meet you, Michael said, genuinely polite. Then to me, did you see the installation in the next room, the one with the mirrors? I did, I said, smiling up at him. It reminded me of something I used to be. Ryan looked between us, at Michael's hand resting lightly at my waist, at my smile, at the calm radiating from the space we shared. He understood in that instant that the door was not just closed. It had been bricked over, painted, and forgotten. I see, he murmured, his voice cracking. You look happy. I am, I said simply. He nodded once, defeated ghostly, and stepped back. I'm glad, really. I believed him, or maybe I just didn't care enough to doubt it. As he walked away, the crowd swallowed him up. The jazz returned. The laughter rose. And just like that, the man who once defined my world became background noise in someone else's story. Michael looked at me curiously. Old friend. I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp and clean on my tongue. Once upon a time. He smiled, resting his forehead against mine. Once upon a time is a terrible place to live. Exactly, I whispered. And when I looked up again, Ryan was gone, like smoke dissolving under the gallery lights. After that night, something in me finally settled. Not the way ashes settle after a fire, more like soil after a long storm, ready to grow things again. Michael and I left the gallery hand in hand, the city lights stretching in ripples across the windshield as we drove. The radio hummed softly. He didn't ask about Ryan again, and I didn't offer. Some stories don't deserve retelling. We stopped at a small cafe that stayed open late. I remember the warmth of the cup between my palms, the quiet hum of conversation, and the reflection of our faces in the window. His calm and kind mind, peaceful. That word used to sound boring to me. Now it felt sacred. When I got home that night, I slipped off my heels, set my phone on silent, and stood by the window. The city moved below like a living thing, strangers in motion headlights pulsing like veins of light. For the first time in years, I felt no pull toward the past. No ghosts, no what-ifs, just now. And now was enough. A week later, a package arrived, no return address. Inside was a small envelope, and within it, a ring. The ring. The one he'd proposed to me with. There was no note, just that empty circle of metal gleaming in its box. I stared at it for a long time. Once that ring had been a promise, now it was just a loop, a perfect symbol of nothingness. A closed shape with no exit, no meaning. I walked to the balcony, held it in my palm one last time, and whispered, I hope you find what you're still looking for. Then I dropped it. It fell silently swallowed by the night. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel relieved. I just felt free. That weekend, Michael took me hiking up a trail that overlooked the city. The air smelled of pine and earth. When we reached the summit, the view stretched forever. He turned to me, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. You look different up here, he said. How so lighter? Like the air suits you. I smiled. Maybe it does. We sat in silence for a while, our fingers intertwined. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one in the church, the one staring at a cracked photo, the one who measured her worth by someone else's love. She was gone, and I didn't mourn her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting everything gold, I realized something. He wanted more, and I became more without him. Because more isn't about passion or chaos or the people who promise the world and hand you ashes. More is what happens when you rebuild yourself piece by steady piece until the reflection staring back at you no longer needs anyone to define it. Later that evening, as Michael drove us home, I looked out at the twinkling skyline and smiled, a quiet, genuine smile that belonged entirely to me. For the first time in years, the story felt finished. Not because someone got punished, not because I found a new love, but because I found myself. And that was enough. He wanted more, I whispered, as the city lights blurred behind us. So I became it. My name is Tiffany Reynolds, and I was 29 when I learned that love can humiliate you in public even when you thought it would save you. I used to believe that if you planned hard enough, if you loved carefully enough, everything would fall into place. I was wrong. That night, the ring box in my coat pocket felt heavier than my entire body. I'd been carrying it around for a week, waiting for the perfect moment. Tonight was supposed to be our 5th anniversary. Ethan Walker and I had met in this very restaurant 5 years ago. Back then, he'd smiled like I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. I wanted to believe that spark could return tonight. The waiter guided me to our table, the same corner one where we'd sat during our first date. Ethan was already there, scrolling through his phone, barely glancing up. "Hey," I said softly, sliding into the seat across from him. "You look beautiful," he murmured, eyes still on the glowing screen. "Thanks." I smiled, though my chest already felt tight. "Sorry, just finishing something for work." Work, real estate, late showings, endless phone calls. Lately, that's all he ever talked about. The waiter came. We ordered. Ethan left his phone face down on the table, but close enough that I could see it light up every few minutes. My stomach knotted tighter with each vibration. I tried to start a conversation. "Do you remember our first date here?" He looked around like he was inspecting property. "It's smaller than I remember," he said, then took a sip of his drink. "But still the best pasta in the city," I added, trying to sound light. "Sure," he replied. The silence after that was deafening. My pulse thundered in my ears. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I'd planned every detail, the same restaurant, the same table, even the same wine we'd shared the night we met. I'd imagined laughter, maybe even tears of joy. Instead, there was distance. His face was unreadable like a stranger's. When the waiter brought our meals, my hands were trembling. I could feel the ring box burning through the fabric of my jacket. I told myself this was just nerves. Once he saw the ring, once he knew what this night meant, he'd remember. He'd see us again. I stood up, ignoring the shocked look from the woman at the next table. Ethan frowned. "What are you doing?" he asked. My knees bent before my brain could stop me. I pulled the small velvet box from my pocket, heart pounding so loudly I could barely breathe. "Ethan Walker," I said, voice shaking. "These 5 years have been the most meaningful of my life. I love you, and I can't imagine my future without you. Will you marry me?" For a few seconds, the world went perfectly still. Then his face twisted, not in joy, not in surprise, but in something close to irritation. "Is this really the best you could do?" he asked. At first, I thought I'd misheard. "What?" "The ring," he said flatly. "Is this the best you could do?" I blinked, heat rushing to my face. I thought you liked simple things. You said you wanted something classic." He sighed, shaking his head. "I said that when I was 24. I'm 32 now, Tiffany. Things change." A murmur spread through the restaurant. I could feel eyes on me, on us, the woman kneeling in a silk dress, holding a ring like a fool. "Ethan." I whispered, "What's wrong?" "We talked about marriage." "No, you talked about marriage. You talked about houses and future kids and routines. I just listened." I stared up at him, my throat tight. "You said you wanted that life too." I said I wanted a life, he corrected coldly. "You assumed it had to be yours." My hands went numb. "I don't understand." He stood abruptly, grabbing his jacket. "Because there's someone else." The sound of that sentence tore through me. "What?" He exhaled like he was tired of pretending. "Her name's Vanessa. She's one of my clients. She understands me, what I want, what I'm capable of. Vanessa." I repeated the name like glass in my mouth. "You've been seeing her." "For 3 months," he said simply. "While you were busy saving for this ring, I realized I couldn't keep living in your version of love. You're still stuck in the past, Tiffany. Vanessa's about the future." My legs felt weak. "You're breaking up with me here now." He shrugged. "I didn't plan to, but this proposal forced the truth out. You deserve someone who wants your kind of life. It's not me." I could feel everyone's stares burning into my back. The ring box in my hand felt ridiculous now, like a prop from a play that had just ended. I stood up slowly, forcing my voice to stay steady. Then I guess I deserve the truth at least. He nodded once, eyes cold. You do. Then he turned and walked out, leaving me standing there alone. I sat back down, the world a blur. The waiter hovered nervously. Ma'am, are you all right? I forced a smile that hurt. Just the check, please. He nodded and disappeared. I stared at the untouched food, the flickering candlelight reflecting off the unopened ring box. The couple at the next table whispered softly, pretending not to look. When I finally stepped outside, the night air hit my skin like a slap. The city lights shimmered, mocking me. I walked without direction through blocks I didn't recognize until I ended up at the riverfront, the ring still clutched in my hand. I sat on a bench, open in the box, and stared at the diamond catching the glow of the streetlights. It was beautiful. Everything I thought love was supposed to be. But Ethan hadn't even looked at it long enough to notice. I wanted to cry, to scream, to call Madison, but instead I just laughed. A brittle, hollow sound that scared even me. Happy anniversary, Tiffany, I muttered to myself. When I got home, the apartment already looked different. His shoes were gone. The toothbrush. Half of the closet empty. On the counter, a note in his handwriting. I'm sorry, Tiff. You'll find someone who wants what you want. I can't keep pretending. Take care. The ring box sat beside it like a cruel joke. I read the note 3 times before I finally set it down. Then I placed the ring back inside its box, closed the lid, and whispered, I hope she was worth it. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, waiting for the sun, wondering how 5 years could vanish in one conversation. And somewhere between midnight and morning, one truth settled deep inside me. I wasn't broken, just misplaced. And I swore I'd never beg to be chosen again. The morning after the proposal, the world felt unnervingly still. No messages, no missed calls, not even a goodbye. Just silence, the kind that makes your chest feel hollow. I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the note. Ethan had left his handwriting looping neatly over the lined paper. You deserve someone who shares your dreams. I can't keep pretending. The words had sounded noble at first glance, but the longer I stared, the more they felt like a coward's excuse. Our apartment looked like someone had torn a photograph in half. The closet half empty, the bathroom counter stripped of his cologne and razor, the space beside the bed cold and untouched. The smell of his aftershave still lingered in the air, faint and mocking. I walked to the window and looked out at the early sunlight cutting across the street, realizing how absurdly normal the world still was. The city didn't pause for heartbreak. Cars still moved. People still laughed below. I picked up the ring box from the counter and turned it over in my hands. It was heavier than it should have been, like it carried all my stupid hope inside. By noon, I forced myself to move. I collected the things he'd left behind, old shoes, an empty watch case, a half-read novel, and dropped them into a cardboard box. There was no crying, no anger, just methodical silence, like cleaning a wound before you can feel the pain. When the box was full, I taped it shut and scribbled Ethan across the top in black marker. Then I slid it against the wall. I'd deal with it later. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. Madison, my closest friend, had texted. Heard what happened. Do you want me to come over? I stared at the message thumb hovering above the screen. Finally, I replied, no. I just need some time to think. She sent back a heart emoji. It somehow made me feel worse. That evening, I called the jewelry store. My voice trembled when I spoke. Hi, I bought a ring from you last month. I need to ask about your return policy. The man on the other end sounded kind. Of course, ma'am. Within 30 days, we can offer a full refund. May I ask, is there a problem with the ring? I hesitated. No. The ring was perfect. The person wasn't. He was silent for a second. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, I whispered. Me too. The next morning, I drove across town to the jeweler. The sky was overcast, as if it understood my mood. The same clerk who had helped me pick out the ring was there. Tom, a silver-haired man with a kind face. He recognized me immediately. Ms. Reynolds. Back so soon. My lips tightened. Not for a good reason. He nodded gently, saying nothing more as I handed him the box. When he opened it, the diamond still sparkled, as if it didn't know it had been rejected. For what it's worth, he said softly. It's a beautiful piece. Any man would have been lucky to get it. I smiled without meaning to. Apparently not lucky enough. Tom processed the return silently. I watched the numbers appear on the screen. $8,000 refunded, 6 months of saving refunded in seconds. When I stepped back into the street, the air felt sharper. The cold bit at my fingers, and I welcomed it. Pain at least meant I could still feel something. The days that followed blurred together. Wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. My job as a senior architect had always grounded me, but now it became an anchor. I took every project, stayed late, every night answered emails at 2 a.m. My coworkers thought I was being ambitious. In reality, I was just trying to drown the noise in my head. Madison came by one evening, letting herself in with the spare key I'd given her years ago. She dropped a grocery bag on the counter. I brought dinner. Real food. You can't survive on coffee and cereal forever. I tried to smile. Watch me. She gave me that look, the one that said she wasn't buying it. Tiff, are you okay? I exhaled, my shoulders slumping. Define okay. Eating. Sleeping. Leaving the house for reasons other than work. I'm fine, I said automatically. You're not. Her voice was gentle but firm. She took my hand, squeezing it. He humiliated you, yes. But you're not the fool here. You loved him, and that's never foolish. I looked away, blinking fast. It feels foolish. It feels human. That night, after Madison left, I stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer against the dark glass. I caught my reflection, tired eyes, hair tied up carelessly, wearing one of Ethan's old sweatshirts I hadn't thrown out yet. I took it off, folded it neatly, and placed it into the donation box by the door. A few days later, my boss, Harold, called me into his office. He was a kind man, mid-50s, the type who always noticed when someone wasn't quite okay. Tiffany, he said, adjusting his glasses. I've been thinking. We're opening a new design branch in Seattle, and we need someone experienced to head the team. You've been one of our strongest project leads. Would you consider taking it Seattle, I repeated. That's across the country. He nodded. I know it's a big move, but I think it could be good for you. A change of scenery, new team, fresh start. He didn't say it outright, but I knew he'd heard about what happened. Madison probably told him. I hesitated for a long moment. Then I nodded. When would you need me? 2 months. Then I'm in. For the first time in weeks, I felt something that wasn't grief. It was relief. That weekend, I packed Ethan's things into the car and drove them to a small storage unit near downtown. The attendant handed me a lock and asked, How long do you need it for? Forever, I said. When the metal door slammed shut, I felt something click inside me. A final door closing on that chapter of my life. That night, I wrote a short text to Ethan. My hands didn't shake this time. Your things are in storage. Unit 217. Access code 4491. No greeting, no emotion. 10 minutes later, his reply came through. Thank you. I'm sorry about how everything happened. I hope we can still be friends. I stared at the message for a long minute. Then I blocked his number. Then I blocked him on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn because apparently pain finds you even in professional spaces. When I finally put the phone down, I exhaled slowly. My heart still hurt, but the edges felt duller. That night, I stood on my balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city below. Somewhere Ethan was probably having dinner with Vanessa. Maybe she was laughing, maybe she wasn't. It didn't matter. The wind was cold, but it carried something clean with it. A hint of rain, a hint of renewal. I whispered into the night, You don't get to break me twice. Seattle was waiting, and I promised myself that when I got there, I wouldn't be the same woman who'd knelt down and begged for love. I'd be someone who never had to. When I stepped off the plane in Seattle, the air smelled like rain and pine. The sky was gray, heavy, endless, but it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a clean slate. The relocation team from the firm had arranged an apartment for me, downtown, 12th floor, glass walls, quiet view of the harbor. My first night there, I unpacked just one box coffee mug, laptop, a framed photo of my parents, and a small cardboard box labeled Old Life. I shoved that one into the back of the closet and promised myself I wouldn't open it. Seattle moved differently from Chicago. Slower, moodier. Mornings started with fog drifting through the streets, and nights ended with the sound of rain against glass. I'd always been afraid of silence, but here it became something sacred, a soft space where I could finally breathe. Work became my compass. I threw myself into my new role as senior architect like a soldier charging into battle. 12-hour days, back-to-back meetings, blueprints scattered across my kitchen counter. When my team complimented my designs, I smiled politely but never lingered. Praise didn't touch me the way it used to. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore, not to Ethan, not to anyone. I was just trying to rebuild from the ashes. One afternoon, while sketching a new project proposal, my colleague Samir leaned over my desk. "You work like you're trying to outrun something," he said, half-jokingly. I looked up and smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." He nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you're doing a damn good job of it." When the office emptied, I'd stay behind. The hum of the printer, the ticking clock that was my company. It was better than coming home to an apartment where no one waited. By the third month, I started filling the empty hours differently. Mornings at the gym, weekends hiking along forest trails, photography classes on Thursdays. Through the lens of my new camera, I started noticing beauty in small, forgotten things. Raindrops on a railing, reflections in puddles, strangers smiling under umbrellas. I began to feel present. Not healed, not yet, but here. Madison called every Sunday. "You sound different," she said one morning, sipping coffee on video chat. "How so?" "Less like a ghost, more like a person." I laughed. "That's progress, then." "It's more than progress, Tiff. It's living." I didn't tell her how sometimes I still woke up reaching for my phone, expecting to see Ethan's name light up the screen. How I still avoided Italian restaurants. Some ghosts take longer to fade. 4 months into my new life, I flew home for Madison's birthday. She threw a small game night at her apartment, close friends, soft music, laughter. That felt effortless. That's where I met Adam Blake. Madison introduced us with a grin that told me she'd been planning it. "Adam, this is Tiffany, the architect I told you about." He smiled warmly. "Ah, the woman who built the new West Ridge complex," I nodded. Guilty. He was tall, well-dressed, but relaxed, the kind of man who didn't need to prove anything. A financial analyst, apparently. He had kind eyes, the sort of eyes that noticed everything but didn't judge. We ended up seated across from each other during a board game. Settlers of Catan. I was rusty, and he was merciless. "You left your weed exposed," he teased. "That's amateur behavior." I was being polite, I shot back. He smirked. "I don't need polite. I need strategy. Do you have sheep?" He laughed. "Maybe. Convince me." That was the first time in months I genuinely laughed the deep, unguarded kind. When the night ended, he offered to walk me to my car. So he said, hands in his pockets, "How's Seattle treating you?" "Still deciding," I said. "The city's beautiful, but it's lonely." He nodded. "Lonely isn't always bad. Sometimes it's just the space between who you were and who you're becoming." The words stuck with me. We started texting after that, short messages at first, then longer ones. He'd send photos of sunsets or ridiculous memes, and I'd reply with coffee recommendations or sarcastic comments. When I returned to Seattle, the messages didn't stop. They just changed time zones. Video calls became routine. Sometimes we'd talk for an hour, sometimes just a few minutes. He'd ask about my projects. I'd ask about his dog Bailey, who kept stealing socks. It felt easy. No pressure, no performance. One Friday evening, he said, "You should come visit. Bailey misses you." I laughed. "Bailey's never met me." "Exactly. She's tired of hearing about you secondhand." 2 weeks later, I booked a flight. Seeing Adam again was strange, like stepping into a memory you didn't realize you'd been rewriting in your head. We met at a small cafe near the airport. He had a coffee waiting for me, just the way I liked it, oat milk, 2 sugars, no questions asked. We spent the weekend exploring the city, talking about everything and nothing. The second night, as we walked along the river, he said quietly, "You look lighter than when I met you." "Seattle rain washed me clean," I said with a half smile. "Or maybe you just stopped carrying what wasn't yours to hold." Something in my chest ached, not in a painful way, more like a door cracking open after being sealed too long. When I flew back to Seattle that Sunday night, I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the calmness in his voice, the ease of being seen without being measured. Our calls became nightly after that, and by the 3rd month, he surprised me with a flight ticket. "Come visit me this time," I said, laughing when he texted the itinerary. He replied, "No more halfway measures. Let's start building something real." 3 months later, Adam visited Seattle, and he never really left. He found a job downtown, rented a place nearby. For the first time in years, my apartment wasn't silent anymore. There were coffee mugs in pairs, laughter echoing down the hallway, playlists shared on lazy Sundays. He didn't ask about Ethan, and I didn't talk about him. There was no need to. Adam wasn't trying to replace anyone. He was building something new with me, brick by brick, moment by moment. One night, we stood on the balcony watching the rain streak down the windows. He wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "You don't have to try so hard to be okay." "I know," I said softly, "but I want to be." "You already are," he murmured. That was the first time I believed it. Seattle still rained every day, but now it didn't sound lonely. It sounded alive. I didn't know it then, but this calm, this peace wouldn't last forever, because the past has a way of finding you even when you've stopped looking for it. And one unexpected phone call would remind me just how fragile healing can be. It's strange how life rebuilds itself in silence. One morning you wake up and realize the ache in your chest has faded, replaced by something steadier. Not joy exactly, but peace. That's what life with Adam Blake felt like. Peaceful. We didn't rush anything, didn't try to script perfection. We just existed together. And somehow that was everything. A year had passed since the move to Seattle. I'd stopped measuring time by heartbreak and started measuring it by moments that mattered. Sunday pancakes, long walks after rain, the sound of Adam humming in the kitchen while making coffee. Our apartment was small but warm. My workspace was filled with sketches and scattered drafts, and Adam's desk sat beside it littered with spreadsheets and half-eaten granola bars. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. One quiet evening, while I sat sketching a project, Adam leaned against the doorway. "You know what I like about you?" he asked. I smiled without looking up. "My incredible design sense," he chuckled. "That too. But mostly you make me feel like I don't have to perform, like I'm enough." I set my pencil down and turned to him. "That's because you are." He crossed the room, kissed my forehead. "Was that what your ex made you feel?" Enough. I hesitated. It wasn't a subject we often touched. "No," I said finally. "Ethan made me feel like love was a test I'd never quite pass, like I had to keep proving my worth." Adam nodded softly. "Then I hope I'm giving you a different lesson." "You are," I whispered. "You really are." A few days later, Madison called. Her voice was bright with gossip, but there was an edge of curiosity. "So, Ethan's ex, that Vanessa woman? Apparently she's gone totally silent online. No photos, no posts, nothing." "Okay," I said, half laughing. "And this matters to me because you used to stalk her Instagram after the breakup. Don't pretend you didn't." I grinned. "Maybe I did once, but I haven't thought about either of them in a long time." "Really," she teased. Not even a little satisfaction knowing they might have imploded. I paused, then shook my head. "No. I'm done being invested in other people's karma." That peace lasted until the phone rang. It was late, around 9:45 p.m. I was reviewing design drafts on the couch while Adam cooked dinner. When the unknown number flashed across my screen, I almost ignored it, but something intuition maybe made me swipe to answer. Hello, silence at first, then a shaky breath. "Tiffany, please don't hang up." My stomach dropped. "Ethan," his voice cracked. "Yeah, please just give me a minute. I called your office. I just needed to talk to you." For a moment, all I heard was the sound of rain tapping the window. I should have hung up, but curiosity, or maybe closure, kept me on the line. "I'm listening," I said quietly. "I made a mistake," he said. "Vanessa. She wasn't who I thought she was. She lied about everything. Her money, her life, even her job. It all fell apart. She left and I don't even know where to start over. I'm sorry that happened," I said flatly. He hesitated. "That's it. You're just sorry. What else do you want me to say, Ethan? That maybe you still think about us, that you remember what we had." I took a slow breath. I do remember. I remember how it ended and how much it hurt, but I also remember who I became because of it, and I'm not her anymore. Long silence. Then quietly, "You're with someone else, aren't you?" "Yes." "What's his name, Adam? How long?" "About a year." He gave a humorless laugh. "A year. You moved on that fast?" "You moved on in 3 months," I said softly, while we were still together. He said nothing, just breathing. Finally, I added, "I hope you find peace, Ethan. I really do. But we're not going back. Take care of yourself." and I hung up before he could reply. Adam came out of the kitchen holding 2 plates of pasta. He saw my face and frowned. Was that him? I nodded. Is he okay? I don't think so, I said, but that's not my problem to solve anymore. He set the plates down and pulled me into his arms. Good, because you're mine now. I smiled against his shoulder. Lucky you. Lucky us, he corrected. A week later, Madison called again. You're not going to believe this, she said breathlessly. A mutual friend told me Ethan's ex, that Vanessa woman, got exposed. The guy she was flaunting, fake career, fake wealth. The ring she posted online. Fake, too. Cubic zirconia from Amazon. I blinked. Wow. That's all you're going to say? Wow. Tiffany. This is poetic justice. I sighed. It's sad, but I'm not cheering for anyone's downfall, Mads. She groaned. You're too healthy now. It's annoying. Occupational hazard of moving on, I teased. When we hung up, I sat for a long time watching the rain trail down the window. There was no satisfaction in knowing they'd fallen apart. Just quiet understanding what goes around eventually comes back. Months rolled by, like pages turning. Adam and I traveled together. Portland, Vancouver, small coastal towns that smelled of salt and coffee. He took photos of me laughing under storm clouds, and every time I looked at them later, I saw someone I barely recognized, lighter, freer. One evening, while we watched the sunset from a cliff, he turned to me. You ever think about the past? Sometimes, I admitted, but mostly I think about now, he smiled. Good answer. He didn't know how much weight those words carried. For years now, had been something I couldn't live in, always replaying what was lost, what should have been. But with him, I'd stopped rehearsing the past and started trusting the present. And yet somewhere deep down, I knew the story wasn't finished, because closure doesn't always come with time. Sometimes it walks back into your life when you least expect it. For me, it came the day I walked into a jewelry store to buy a ring of my own. The day I decided to propose to Adam, the sky looked like it had been painted in shades of gray and forgiveness. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled damp, like the world was waiting for something new to begin. 2 years had passed since that humiliating night in the restaurant, and for the first time, I wasn't haunted by it. When I thought about kneeling again, it didn't feel desperate. It felt right. Adam never made grand gestures about love. He just showed up every single day in small, reliable ways. Morning coffee, shared silence, holding my hand during bad news and good. There was no performance, no test, just consistency. That's what I wanted to propose to the kind of love that doesn't need fireworks to last. I walked into the same jewelry store where I'd once returned the ring that broke me. The chime above the door echoed through the quiet space, and for a second the memory hit me like cold wind. Same glass counters, same soft yellow lights, same faint smell of polished wood and velvet boxes. Ms. Reynolds. I looked up. The man behind the counter smiled. Tom, the silver-haired jeweler who'd helped me years ago. He still remembered. Well, he said kindly, I didn't expect to see you again. Neither did I admitted. What brings you back? I need an engagement ring, I said, smiling. For someone who makes life make sense again. His face lit up. Wonderful. Congratulations. We spent the next hour looking through settings and stones. I knew what I wanted. Simple, elegant, delicate. Something that reflected strength without shouting it. When I finally found it, an oval-cut diamond on a slender gold band, Tom nodded approvingly. Excellent choice. What's her name? He asked automatically. Then quickly corrected himself. Sorry, his name. Adam, I said softly. He's patient, kind, the sort of man who doesn't need to be dazzled to feel love. Sounds like a lucky man, Tom said warmly. I smiled. No, I'm the lucky one. As Tom went to print the paperwork, the bell above the door chimed again. I didn't turn around at first, until I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. Hi, I need someone to look at this. The sound of her tone, low, uncertain cracking in the middle, made the hair on my neck stand up. Vanessa. I froze the air, leaving my lungs in one sharp exhale. She walked toward the counter beside mine, clutching a small velvet ring box in both hands, like it was something poisonous. Tom's assistant greeted her politely. Of course, ma'am. What can we help you with? I was told this was real, she said softly, but I need to know for sure. The assistant opened the box and pulled out a glittering ring. He looked at it under a jeweler's loupe, then frowned. Ma'am, he said gently, this isn't a diamond. It's cubic zirconia. Vanessa blinked. That can't be right. He said, I'm sorry, but it's worth about $50 retail. Her face crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling before she could hide them. I stood frozen, the memory of Ethan's betrayal and her name echoing in my mind like thunder. Vanessa, one of my clients. We've been together for 3 months. Now here she was. Different. Thinner. Her makeup smudged, her clothes rumpled. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Ma'am, the assistant asked softly, unsure what to do. She shook her head, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. It's just, everything he told me was a lie. Tom called out, unaware of the tension. Ms. Reynolds, your ring is ready. Beautiful choice. Your fiancé is very lucky. Vanessa's head snapped up. She turned slowly, and when our eyes met, her breath caught. Tiffany, she whispered. I straightened, forcing calm into my voice. Hello, Vanessa. Her face went pale. You're buying an engagement ring. I am. For him. She said it like she already knew the answer. Yes, I said simply. For the man who never made me feel small. Her lips trembled. Can we talk, please, just for a minute? Part of me wanted to walk out right then to leave her to her ghosts. But another part, the one that still remembered what it felt like to be humiliated, stayed still. All right, I said. 1 minute. She took a shaky breath. I don't know where to start. Trevor, that's the man I left Ethan for. He lied about everything. The money, the career, the house, all fake. I lost everything, Tiffany. My job, my friends, even my family stopped answering my calls. I thought I'd built something better, but it was all glass. And when it shattered, there was nothing left. Her voice cracked. I destroyed something real for something that never existed. I looked at her for a long time. She wasn't the woman from Ethan's photos, polished, confident, untouchable. She was human now, fragile, and for the first time I didn't feel anger, just quiet pity. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said. She flinched. You're sorry I am, because I know what it feels like to lose something you thought was forever. She shook her head. No, you don't. You have him now. You got the happy ending. I sighed. This isn't about endings, Vanessa. It's about choices. You made one and so did I. She stared at me, eyes glistening. Do you ever think about him, Ethan? Sometimes, I said honestly, but not in the way you think. I don't miss him. I just remember him as a lesson, a reminder of what I won't settle for again. She bit her lip. He told me once you proposed to him, that you knelt in front of everyone. I did, I said calmly. And he said it was the best thing that ever happened to his ego. Her eyes widened, tears spilling freely. I'm so sorry. For everything. I nodded. I forgave you a long time ago, Vanessa. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want to go back to the same story. Tom returned just then, placing a small velvet box in front of me. All set, Ms. Reynolds. I picked it up, feeling its weight light, steady, full of promise. Thank you, I said to him. Then to Vanessa softly. Take care of yourself. Maybe start by forgiving the woman in the mirror. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me I heard her crying quietly, the sound raw and real. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and rhythmic, like applause from the universe. I looked up at the gray sky and smiled. This time the ring in my hand didn't feel like regret. It felt like closure. The next evening, Seattle glowed under a silver mist. The air smelled like wet leaves and rain-soaked pavement. I remember thinking, this is what calm feels like. Not the absence of chaos, but the presence of peace. I had spent all day planning something simple, personal. No fancy restaurant, no audience. Just the two of us, the way love should begin again quietly without witnesses. The park where Adam and I had our first kiss sat just a few blocks from our apartment. There was a small wooden bench under an oak tree, the same spot where he'd once told me, lonely isn't always bad. Sometimes it's just the space between who you were and who you're becoming. Tonight that space had finally closed. He was already there when I arrived, standing by the bench, hands in his jacket pockets. His smile was the kind that always made my heart settle. You're late, he teased. Architects are never late, I said, brushing raindrops from my hair. We're just dramatic with timing. He laughed, pulling me into a hug. You okay? You've been quiet since this morning, I nodded, breathing in his scent coffee cedar home. I'm more than okay. He tilted his head. You sure? Yeah, I said softly, stepping back. There's something I want to ask you. His brow furrowed, confused but curious. I took a slow breath, then dropped to one knee. For a moment, time stilled. Only the soft patter of rain, only the sound of my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Adam Blake. I began, voice trembling. But sure, you're the first person who ever made me feel like exactly enough was more than enough. You never asked me to be smaller or quieter or simpler. You just let me be me and loved me for it. His eyes widened, breath-catching, as I pulled the small velvet box from my coat. So I'm asking you now, will you marry me? He blinked, stunned. Then slowly a smile spread across his face, warm and disbelieving. You're serious. Completely. He crouched down to my level, rain glinting in his hair. Yes, he said, voice cracking with emotion. God, yes. When I slid the ring onto his finger, it fit perfectly, as if it had always belonged there. We both laughed and cried, rain mingling with our tears, until I couldn't tell the difference. He cupped my face. You have no idea how much I love you. I think I do, I whispered, because I feel it every day. We stayed there like that for a long while, the city lights shimmering around us, the world perfectly quiet except for the sound of our breathing. Later that night, we sat on the bench, his arm around me, watching the street lamps flicker through the drizzle. I've been thinking, he said softly. Would you ever want to go back to Chicago visit? I smiled faintly. Maybe one day. But not to relive anything, just to prove to myself that I survived it. He kissed my temple. You did more than survive, Tiffany. You rebuilt. His words lingered. They reminded me of something I'd written in my journal months ago, but never said aloud. Healing doesn't mean you stop hurting. It means you finally stop wishing the past was different. That night I realized I had stopped wishing. A week later, a small envelope arrived in the mail from Tom the jeweler. I assumed it was a receipt or thank you note, but when I opened it, I found a short, handwritten message. Ms. Reynolds, I thought you should know. The woman who was here the other day came back to sell her ring. It was unfortunately worthless. She left without saying much. I hope she finds peace, and I hope your story ends differently. Warm regards, Tom. I set the letter down, exhaling slowly. My chest ached not with pain, but with something like compassion. For a long time, I'd imagined closure as confrontation, a final word, a satisfying ending. But real closure, I learned, was quiet. It looked like forgiveness. It sounded like silence. I whispered into the still air, I hope you find peace too, Vanessa, and you, Ethan. And I meant it. That weekend, Adam and I celebrated with takeout and laughter. No champagne, no speeches, just warmth and truth. At one point, he looked at me across the couch, a soft smile in his eyes. You ever think about what led you here all the time, I said. It's strange. For years I thought I'd been rejected, but now I see it differently. How so? They didn't reject me, I said quietly. They released me, so I could find this a love that fits without shrinking. He reached over, took my hand, and kissed it. You're the best decision I never saw coming. I smiled. And you're the answer I stopped looking for. People sometimes ask me if I regret that night in the restaurant, the one where I knelt for the wrong man and walked away shattered. I don't. Because that night broke me open just enough to make space for the life I have now. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love doesn't always arrive wrapped in applause. Sometimes it shows up, quietly sits beside you in the dark, and stays until the light returns. And when it does, you'll know, not because it dazzles you, but because it finally feels like home.